I'm going to try to get through all of this. I'm going to introduce very briefly the Second World War Discovery Box. We'll explore together the digital content that I mentioned, and discuss some practical ways that you can use those resources in class and for either in class or for remote learning, because we know this year may look a little bit different than others. And at the very end, I'll preview some of the new and upcoming activities, resources, programs from the War Museum. Great. So right off the top, I'm going to try something new, and I'd like to get a sense, I would like to get to know you all a little bit better. So I'm going to try a new tool that I've just learned about called Mentimeter. I'm not sure if anyone's already used that, but it will involve us needing to use another tab in your browser, or you can use a mobile device. So I know that either Erin or Rachel is going to put a link up to that in the chat, which
I
will
put it up in
awesome.
the chat. So if you just want to minimize your screen as well.
Yeah, so you can go there. And the first question I want to ask, just to get a sense of where everyone's at, because I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now and questions, is how is everyone feeling about the return to school? So the Mentimeter will give you 3 opportunities to use words, and I chose 3 because I know there are lots of feelings, but I thought that might give us a sense of where everyone's at. And what Mentimeter does is it will generate a word cloud. So is anyone having any trouble with that, or is everyone, I see a counter down here in the bottom that numbers are going up. And how many people do we have total? 26 in total?
Yeah.
So if anybody's having any issues, just you can little raise hand or ask in the chat. You might be just thinking about that. That's cool. So awesome. I see the numbers going up.
We discovered that we all had similar words.
Also, I can tell you that there's all sorts of filters and things you can do. You can choose the number of words. You can choose all the options on how you want it to display. So I'm just going to put a 30-second countdown timer on it right now. Give everyone a couple more seconds to finish that, and then it'll close. And while that's happening, I can show the results to see what it generates. So, and that's what I liked about it, is getting to see the visualization of what everyone is thinking, feeling. And it's something that you can leave open for a very long time. So you could do an exercise with this. It could be sentences or words, but oh, I think it gives me, I can X out words here. So anxious is the big one, and uncertainty for sure. And I see hopeful in there. It's a little bit. Excited comes up, and that's so, yeah, there's definitely, you know, I think we can all acknowledge a lot of feelings around the return to school. But thanks for sharing. I think that's exciting. And I'll say that Mentimeter lets you use, I don't know if anyone has, if you've used it before, but it lets you do up to 2 slides or questions, quizzes in its free mode. And I'm using their free mode just to try the visualizations out. And the next one is a little bit more practical. I'd like to know what your familiarity is with the supply line discovery boxes. So you should, on your screens, on that same code, that same screen, be able to see the questions. So if you can let me know, yes, I've used a First World War Discovery Box. I've used a Second World War Discovery Box. I've used both, which is, you know, we just launched Second World War last year, so there's not that many of you. Or it wasn't available, comes up a lot. And also, maybe you've never heard of it, and that's exciting. So I'd like to know, some people are very familiar with it. So it looks like the First World War box is most common, which is great because I'm not going to talk about that one today. So you already know lots about that one. And a good number of you haven't heard of it before or haven't had any experience with it. So I won't spend too long on this. I know that not everyone has had a chance to submit an answer. Flag me down if you want me to pause there. But I think that gives us a good place to jump right in. So I'm gonna pop back over to the slideshow.
The slides?
Yep, everyone's, okay, perfect, good, excellent. We're rolling. So Supply Line is like taking the Canadian War Museum into your classroom. That's the idea behind the program. It's an accessible, hands-on learning experience that brings the Canadian War Museum to classrooms across the country. We assembled authentic and reproduction artifacts that help bring history to life for your students. It's through object-based learning that we want students to connect with in a meaningful way to Canada's past. In 2014, we launched the First World War Discovery Box. So there's a scratchy uniform, there's a gas alarm rattle, there's an intricately carved piece of trench art. And it gives them a whole new understanding of a long ago conflict. In 2019, in September, we launched the Second World War version, which was very exciting and had been asked for very, very many times by teachers who loved the First World War version. In addition to the physical objects, we created digital content that complements the experience, but that could also be used on its own or in a variety of ways. We tried to make it as multi-use as possible. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, but I assume that everyone's still got questions about the physical kit with COVID and all of those things, so I'll acknowledge that off the top. Yes, we are lending the Discovery Boxes for this school year. We made the decision after reviewing all the relevant public health and museum authority guidelines, and we've created protocols and processes that can ensure that we hope will ensure the health and safety of educators and students. It's a national program, and so I know the situation varies by province. And we know that most schools won't be able to visit us this year. Sounds like field trips of any kind may be not happening in all provinces. So in that sense, it's almost more important than ever to make this kind of hands-on or even physical program available. So we're gonna try and we're gonna see how that goes, and that just skipped ahead on me. The bookings opened on Monday, and you may know that it does book up really quickly. Normally we'd be entirely, full by now, but it's been predictably slow, and I know there are lots of questions about this school year, so there's still availability for this semester. And so you can go to Supply Line, the website's down here, to find out more about that. And I won't get into the specifics about the traveling kits, but if you have questions at the end, you can ask me questions or shoot me an email after this is all over. But to give you a sense of what's included in the Second World War Discovery Box, we have 23 objects in total. So this is just a little snapshot. And it's a big range of experiences that we represent in the physical way. Each object has a label identifying the object. It has a backgrounder that gives you a little bit more in-depth information and tells you what it reveals about the Second World War, why we chose to include it, and at least one contextual photo showing the object in use during the Second World War. And some of those objects have multiple uses. So for example, the helmet down here, I'll just try my laser pointer, has, we've got photos of it being used by soldiers, but also by the women that you saw in the last photo, and also by folks on the home front who would be training for air raid precautions. And our big ideas for this whole program are that for Canada, the Second World War is a total war. So that really guided our thinking. The experiences of the Second World War vary depending on your age, gender, cultural or ethnic background, and where you lived in Canada. So it's not just one narrative. There's a lot of different experiences. The past affects the present, and the outcomes of the Second World War still affect life in Canada today. And history museums use objects to tell stories about the past. So that's how the objects, how we were thinking about the objects. And what I'm going to show you are the digital resources. So you can explore all of these at any time. If you go to warmuseum.supplyline, you can click on teacher resources. And I just wanted to show you here the filters that you can choose. We've thrown up there all of the things that relate to the objects, but also the things that relate to the digital content that we created. So the artifact backgrounders, contextual photographs, the lesson plans, posters and artwork as well, those all relate to the objects and can be used in the classroom. You can combine them with the other things, or you can use the other things on your own. So the archival documents, the overviews, and the personal stories were all created according to these themes. So we chose daily life, forced relocation, the Holocaust, war at sea, war in the air, war on land, war work, and women in the war effort, so as the themes, the big broad themes. And that's the framework we use for creating the digital content. So you can search by, say, for example, daily life or whoa, how is that going ahead on me? Sorry. You can choose daily life and archival documents and see all of the things that come up for that. But very briefly, gosh, I'm going to show you, just talk about what the big ideas with our themes. So for War on Land, we talk about Canada's Army being the largest of Canada's 3 armed services. And there were a total of about 750,000 men and women who served in the Army across Canada and in other parts of the world. So we talk about the Canadian Women's Army Corps. We talk about service, in prisoner of war camps in Canada and the different things they did in all the theaters of war. War at sea. So we talk about both sailors and the Wrens and the Merchant Marine, which is one that people often feel is underrepresented. So we want to show all aspects of the war at sea, and clearly the Battle of the Atlantic is the central theme there. Okay, war in the air. So Canada's Air Force is the 4th largest in the world by 1945, and more than 250,000 men and women are in the Royal Canadian Air Force, and then more with the RAF. And the BCATP, which you see represented in this painting just here, is a major part of Canada's contribution as well. And then women in the war effort. So it was important that we represent women's service in all the branches of service. So for example, you have some examples in like land, sea, and air, but clearly there are more men than women in those services. But because the Second World War is so pivotal, it's a major event, and it impacted women in different ways. We wanted to create its own theme. So the big ideas are that the Second World War created new opportunities for women. They filled vacant wartime positions. They served in all branches of the military. So this is Molly Lamb Boback here, and this is one of her paintings, Private Roy. But we wanted to recognize the added pressure that they faced to volunteer, to support the war, and to maintain households alone during this time. So that's the big ideas in the women in the war effort. And then,
could you repeat the name of the artist, Sandra?
Molly Lamb Boback. And at the end, I will provide a link to, it's a great question because we just created an online exhibition about about her war art. And she is Canada's only the first female Canadian war artist. and she did fantastic work documenting the Canadian Women's Army Corps experience. So that's something I was going to mention as a really great resource. And war work. So clearly we think of the factory production, and that's definitely a big part of it. But we also wanted to show that it's not just women in factories, although I'm representing that with one of these photos here, but still there are a number of men, women who are both working in the factories, as well as agricultural production, and thinking about those contributions and that really big role that Canada played. And then daily life. This seems like, you think about just your daily minutia, but the daily life theme kind of is the one that gathered everything, because it mobilized industrial, natural resources, and human resources, and transformed Canadian lives in their everyday experience. So this is where we talk about rationing. We talked about conscription. We talked about all of the different ways that it represents the people left in Canada and their daily lives. And then the last two are slightly different. So Japanese Canadian forced relocation is an example of, well, obviously it's a theme unto itself. And so we treated the forced relocation and the Holocaust as our difficult subject themes. They tend to be talked about in more detail. It's not something that you can just really have one object in a kit and wrap up that conversation. So we chose to do it primarily through the use of our thematic content, where we use archival sources and personal stories. So for example, for forced relocation, we have Michiko Ayukawa, or Michiko Ishii. She was Midge Ayukawa after she married. But we have her personal story. We have a veteran, his story. So we chose to do it through different perspectives because we feel like the personal story really gives you, a good glimpse of that experience. And I also just threw up some, also other institutions have really great learning resources. So I will flag a couple of these, and we will share the presentation afterwards. So if you want to, or you can get them in the recording. The one I mentioned down here, the Learning at the Royal BC Museum, they have a whole pathway that you can search, and a lot of their material is digitized, and they have videos. I don't know that they have a lot of French content. Bilingual content's a bit of an issue for most of them, but the NFB interactive is great. It is it's very big for downloading, so it depends on your device. I'll give you that caution. Same for the Holocaust. Again, we focused on our collection for the materials. And this is the Zeiderman family. And so we do a profile of the family, and Selma Zeiderman is the only survivor of the Holocaust. And his descendants emigrated to Canada, and we have some of those records. So that's one of the ways we do it, through the personal stories and through archival documents related to their family. We also have Abba Bayevsky, who's a war artist, a Jewish Canadian war artist, who lives with the experience of witnessing the Holocaust and the liberation of the camps. And also the two, Musée de l'Holocauste in Montreal also has both English and French resources if you're not already familiar with them. And I think that they have physical traveling kits as well that cover that in detail. So what I'd like to talk about next is the resources, or just to give you a very quick preview of what the resources look like. So each theme has its own overview. This is, for example, War at Sea, and we developed it with reading level and accessibility in mind. I should mention, I don't think I mentioned off the top, that all of these resources are available in both English and French. And even though my presentation is in English today, if you want to ask a question in French, that's absolutely fine. So yeah, we have grade 8 as the main reading level for this document, and it's chunked up with headings. And the short overview is written at a lower grade reading level. And yeah, very simple timeline. So just kind of the basics that should be able to keep things going. And this is one of our archival documents. And so on the opposite end of accessibility, we know that handwriting is typically difficult to read, but this is a really excellent letter and is really, really eye-opening. So we wanted to include it. And so therefore we have a transcription here of all of the things in the letter. And Private Leslie Neufeld is one of the first Canadians who parachutes in on D-Day, and he's killed on that first day of battle. But what isn't actually in this, we may not fully, or it may not be obvious, is his family is Mennonite, and so his family was opposed to the war, but he felt strongly that he had to participate. And so you can see that kind of written into his letter, that level of faith that he had. I get my notes here for the personal narratives. So as I said, we relied heavily on personal stories for the themes, because we think that really gives you an insight into the experience. So the first one here is Guy Rainville, and he was he's a pilot, and he helped to recruit troops for the Air Force in Quebec. And he was shot down over Germany in 1944 and taken prisoner, but he survived the war and comes home to his wife. And she was home with just a little baby while he was in camps, and we have some of their letters back and forth. Doug Sam was 24 when he enlisted, and we do acknowledge the fact that he tried to enlist but was rejected because of racist policies at the beginning, but he did end up becoming a member of the Air Force in 1942. Again, he was shot down, but he worked with the French resistance and eventually trained with a special bomber unit to fight in Japan. Alan Bundy, he broke racial barriers by becoming the first Canadian-born Black pilot in the Royal Canadian Air Force at the age of 22. Norma Etta Lee, she was one of the very few air traffic controllers in the war. And then Margaret Pictou-Lavillois, she originally hoped to become a nurse, but she joined the Air Force and eventually served as a photo reconnaissance technician during the war. And I'll mention that this is the only person we couldn't find a photograph of, but her story was so strong. We do have a photo of her, but it's post-war, and it didn't work. It wasn't as strong as this painting of her in uniform. So we included that. And then George Checker, he was a member of a bomber crew during a raid, and most of the crew made it out safely, but he and another one of his crewmates were killed in that crash when their parachutes didn't open. So we wanted to show that the range of experience, both in active service and supporting on the home front, and each of those has a short write-up. So what I'm going to do is jump into some activities. I don't know if there are any questions so far, Erin, that need addressing. No? Good. So what I'd like to do for this activity is an exercise called visual thinking strategies. So one of the amazing resources that we have at the museum is our war art collection. And whenever possible, I like to use it to talk about some of the big themes. With visual thinking strategies, it's just a matter of taking some time to look closely at the painting and then discussing it as a group. So if people are comfortable speaking, they can make that, they can make their comments one at a time. We can maybe do raising hands, or we can put it in the chat. That's good with me too. So what I'll do is I'm going to give everyone 30 seconds. And one of the most difficult things to do when you're, I think, talking on a Zoom call is to just have the silence for a minute, but I'm going to be deliberate here. And I'm going to give everyone about 20 seconds just to take a look at the painting, observe, look at things you might not notice, zoom in if you like, and then we'll come back and discuss it in just 20 seconds. So 20 seconds on the clock, go. Okay, and actually I will admit that I lied. I don't actually have a timer, but that felt like 20 seconds. So if everyone's able to use the chat, what I'd like is if you could just say, I'll ask the question, what's going on in this painting? And if you want to just jump in with what you notice, what's going on, what jumps out at you, and we'll start a discussion from there.
If you put anything in the chat, I can verbalize it. Women building airplanes, no safety equipment.
Okay, I see different jobs women worked. So people mentioning what types of jobs. So what?
French flag.
Okay, so I think maybe you're noticing this flag over here in the corner. Interesting. Okay, flags. Industry. 3 women working on an airplane. So, I mean, based on what we're seeing, I see a lot of people noticing that women are working on the airplanes. So these 3 individuals here, what is it about them, about how they're painted, that tells you that they're women? Their hair is put up. Okay, so I see that. So we think
length of hair.
Length of hair. So this woman's hair over here kind of looks a little curvy. Heels.
High heels.
So we see heels down here. So the shoes are visible here. Body shape. Curves. Yeah, I was looking at this today kind of myself, like noticing that, especially this woman back here. I don't know if you guys also think of other of the positions, like the hair. I kind of see the rolls here of the way the hair is styled. I don't know if I'd call it a full-on victory roll. Okay. What more can you find? Or maybe I can go back to the industry or the French flags. So we know that these are French flags. That's what people are indicating because of the colors. But that's interesting because I know that this painting is done on Canada, but that is interesting. Interesting that the color of the uniform, the same color of is the same color of the airplane. So you're noticing this kind of yellowy green shade of the uniform. And this airplanes are yellowy green.
French aircraft.
This note says uniforms are too big because they were made for men. Okay, so you're noticing that the kind of the overalls that are here are a little bit bulky. Rolled up at the ankle probably, I assume. No such thing as safety equipment. Somebody, Christina just popped in here. Yeah, so, I mean, what surprises you about that? What sort of safety equipment would you expect to see? Probably helmets, probably gloves. They're working with their bare hands. So you can see up here, they've clearly got tools, goggles. We see a toolbox here in the bottom. Awesome. Okay, so are these not training aircraft given their yellow color? Okay, so that's something that's, Erin pointed out, thinking that the aircraft that were used for the BCATP, British Commonwealth Air Training Plan, were yellow, and that's something that you might also notice. So that's also a possibility. So I'm gonna pause our that activity here and just point out that this works really well synchronously, but it could also work asynchronously. And the idea with visual thinking strategies And I'm not an expert in it at all, but the idea is that you're non-judgmentally acknowledging the comments that are made, visibly pointing out that item in the painting so that the rest of the participants can see, paraphrasing what's been said. You get an opportunity to add in new vocabulary if you're working with especially younger learners or it's a new theme, and relating the questions one to the other, or the comments that different students make. So you're showing that the observers, the participants, might have different interpretations of that, of what they're seeing. So kind of recognizing that. So I will, but I'm sorry to give, not to, I won't go into any detail about the painting itself, but we'll let you know that it's called Maintenance Jobs in the Hangar. And these are Canadian Women Army Corps, the Royal Canadian Air Force Women's Division members who are working on aircraft. And it was painted by Paraskeva Clark. Okay, so the next activity, and I won't spend too much time going on these activities, we'll share the resources afterwards as well. I just wanted to point out different ways that the digital resources might be used. Another one is propaganda. I know that a lot of teachers already have their own lesson plans for propaganda, so I don't want to, didn't try to recreate the wheel here, but we do feature some of the posters in our collection are on a website. There's a lesson plan that you can download, you can use, and I'm going to try and do a new share again to show you what the poster what the lesson plan or the worksheet looks like. So can everyone see the propaganda poster worksheet now? So this is a fillable PDF. So you could assign this to your students either in class, printed out, or digitally online, hopefully. And you can put your answer here in the question box. So we're looking at who created the poster, what is the overall message of the poster, how is the message shared, what language, colors, symbols, shapes, etc. So again, doing that observation work, looking at the target audience, emotions that are expressed. So getting them to like dig deeper. So it might look angry or it might look hopeful or it might, so getting some words, but having them identify what helps them or what they're seeing that makes them say that, which I really quite like as a prompt. And then what propaganda techniques are used. And this lesson plan also articulates some of those techniques. And then what does the poster's message tell you about Canadian values and beliefs during the Second World War? And do you think it would have been effective during the Second World War? Why or why not? So it kind of scaffolds that conversation. And
sorry,
yeah.
Thank you, Christine, for mentioning the Project Zero. I just put the link in the chat for anyone who is interested.
The visible thinking strategies from Project Zero.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the one I'm specifically modeling with the VTS is you can go to visualthinkingstrategies.org and they have lessons. It tends to be based on art museums and art galleries, but they're working on visual thinking strategies for museums and objects. So we're experimenting with using those same techniques with our collections. That's good. And then the personal stories. So this is an example of what is included in a personal story. They're 2 pages max. So if you print them out, we wanted them to be just one page double-sided that you could hand out. Again, we did a layer of accessibility. So the bulk of it is written at a grade 8 reading level. The introduction is written at a grade 5 reading level. So you can get the very, very basics just from the introduction here. And there's always one portrait of that person during wartime. But we wanted to show, this kind of links back to the Canada was a total war and that it impacted Canadians in real ways. So we always talk about their life before the war, what they did during the war and how they were impacted by it and how it affected their life afterwards. If they survived, sometimes it's talking about their family. And there's a little section for vocabulary here as well. And one of the things I can show you for working with that is another worksheet that exists in it's part of our mini museum lesson plan, which is, I'll admit, is a very long kind of convoluted lesson plan. It's if you have the kit, the box in your class and you're trying to use it to build a mini museum. One of those options is to start from a personal story, but I think this might be useful if you want to give students, probably youngish students, a way to kind of read that and pull out the information. So it's the basics, the person's name, how old they were, where did they, like geography, where did they work, live, and travel during the war, and what was their job, some interesting facts that they liked. And if you were going to go that extra step of, say, create an exhibition or a presentation about that person, you could choose an object, an image, or an archival source that helps you kind of bring that person to life. Or it doesn't necessarily, we're for that activity using the historical imagination. So maybe it's not that person's actual jacket, but it's an example of a jacket or a propaganda poster that, you know, would have been relevant to that experience. So that's one of the other kind of ways that some of the existing materials might be adapted, that you could assign it either digitally or you could print it out and work at it in the classroom. So let me go back to the slideshow again very quickly. I think now is the breakout time. So what I've done for this is I haven't spent a lot of time on the archival documents. But I've created a Google Doc that has links to archival documents in the collection, or that are organized by theme. So Erin, I think you're going to help with creating the breakout rooms. And so with that, if you're able to click on that Google Doc, if you can assign one person to be your recorder, very, very high level, just, you know, what are your immediate likes, dislikes about the object, about the resource, and maybe brainstorm amongst yourselves how you might use that in your classroom, either in person or remotely. And at the end of this, we'll compile all those answers and share them with the group after the session is over.
Okay, so just make sure. So a question was brought up to Rachel, how are Indigenous histories integrated?
Yeah, so they are, they're woven in. So we tried to include examples in photographs that we chose, and we were deliberate across our personal stories. And one of the things I should have mentioned off the top is that when we developed the personal stories, we had 38 in total. So there's between 3 and 6 per theme. We had very deliberate targets. So we have 50% male versus female among all of the themes. So it's obviously more men in the army, but women are still there. And there's probably more women in daily life, but men are still there. So we wanted to show that people are there. There's a range in age, geography. So we want to show it's not just the 25-year-old soldier who experiences the Second World War. It's children, it's senior citizens. They all have an experience that's their own. For Indigenous and other racial minorities. So we looked at having different perspectives in each of the themes. And so I can't name off the top of my head how many are Indigenous stories, but I know that there are at least 3, possibly 4, maybe more. Margaret Labedois is one of the examples. So in terms of specific Indigenous experience, we chose to do it through a personal perspective. So we have their profile that's featured. Does that answer the question? Good. So is everybody back from the breakout rooms now?
Yes.
Can we move on?
Yep.
Cool. I'm gonna go back to the PowerPoint again very quickly. And the next few things we can jump right on through. I'll really briefly talk about the new and upcoming things that we're planning. The big one is that we're looking at expanding our online activities in the future. So we're going to be pilot testing interactive virtual learning. So this is a great opportunity. And at the end of this, I'm going to, I have a little survey that if you are interested to give us your thoughts, it's so helpful. It's both, your thoughts on this presentation and webinar, because we're going to do more professional development, but also what you might like in terms of themes and content for future online programs. So it's a chance to let us know what we can do to help you. And if you're interested in being a pilot partner with us, if you'd like to have your class or participate in a pilot session or be part of a focus group, by all means, please get in touch, because we're looking for partners in developing this and feedback, as we want it to be as useful as possible. We're also developing some new Remembrance Day resources that are going to be coming out in October. So updating some of the content we used to have on the website. We're making it a little bit more usable, I think, for teachers today. And office hours for educators. So it's something new we're trying. We did one in June, and we're doing another on next Tuesday. And then in the fall, we'll have a regular scheduled time. So, and that's a really informal thing where you can just pop in. I will be there. My friend Jessica will be there. We'll be there just to answer questions. So it's not formal, and it's office hours, just like a teacher would have or a professor would have. You can pop in and ask your questions. During closure, while the museum is officially closed, and we've developed a museum at home landing page. So it might be something that you're interested in exploring a little bit. It has, this may not be specifically for students, but there's an education section. But there are online exhibitions like Molly Lamb Boback, which I mentioned off the top. And so this is a really excellent resource that you can check out. Like I said, my first idea when I was going through it, it features a lot of her paintings of Canadian Women's Army Corps. You could, go through it, or have your students go through it and name or identify all of the different jobs that they see women doing in the Canadian Women's Army Corps. It might be a really easy introductory visual exercise. But there are lots of ideas that came to mind when I started looking through it. It's not specifically built for students, so it wasn't with an education audience exclusively in mind, but I think it relates really well. Other exhibitions are Liberation of the Netherlands, which we had the anniversary of this year, and VJ Day, which Victory in Japan, which just the anniversary just passed. So those are more specific, but those would be items that I'd suggest checking out. And now, if anyone has questions that I didn't cover, or that came up, I don't know why this is skipping ahead without me, but it has kept me on track. So I'll say thanks to the PowerPoint bug in there that's moving my PowerPoint along for me. Yeah, are there any questions or comments or thoughts that came up over the course of the breakout sessions, or that that you guys would like to have some background?
Sandra, there was a question that came up in our breakout session. We were looking at the sinking of the Athabasca. There's a series of 4 sketches. And we were mostly just asking a bunch of questions that might be interesting. And one of the ones that was asked was, how did the museum acquire these sketches? And I think that's kind of an interesting story that it, would be neat to know.
And to be honest, I don't know the answer to that specific object. And I think going that little bit deeper on objects might be something that we would do in school programs, like talking about provenance and talking about, who it's from, and how that history of the object is why we collect. So, and one of our school programs, we talk about how museums decide to collect things. What are the criteria we're trying to evaluate? Is it important historically? Does it belong to an important person? Does it reveal something about a specific point in time? So those sort of decisions, I think they really work well with the historical thinking concepts. They support that kind of historical evaluating primary source and evidence. So that specific one, I don't know. I know that the painter, or the sketch artist, he made those in a prisoner of war camp. So I do know that, and I don't know the specifics of how we came to acquire them.
Yeah, I wasn't you know, looking,
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting you to know the answer. I just thought it was an interesting question that the War Museum could possibly down the road help provide some answers on to some objects or
yeah. And you know, if you go through our online collections, you can find lots of really interesting objects, but people have a lot of other questions. And I hope that, you know, the virtual programs might give us a way to like dig a little deeper and you know, focus on the details.
Karen from TDSB wants to know if you at the museum are offering any synchronous opportunities in the fall or throughout the year. Maybe.
Yeah, so we are hoping to. That's part of the interactive virtual learning model that we're pilot testing. So I'm going to be pilot testing some of these sessions in the fall, which I think synchronous would be our first choice, because I think having that connection really helps. We're fine tuning all of the tools and resources. And so I'm looking for schools who'd like to volunteer to be the test classes. So if you're interested, I'll put my contact information up at the end of the slide, and also the feedback survey if you're interested. If you can do either of those activities, then that's how you can get involved.
Thank you. Sounds great. Okay.
Cool. Oh, I see there's a question about career and educational pathways in museums. That's one of my questions in the survey, because I think that's if people are telling us what types of programs they like, then that helps us decide what programs to develop. And we're really fortunate with our supply line projects that we've done teacher evaluations the whole way through. So I've got years of data on what teachers liked, what they didn't like, what they want more of, what didn't work for them. And that really helped guide the development of the Second World War program. So for example, they told us, you teachers, you told us that you want more diverse content. You want the home front content. You want the experience of women. So all of that feedback was the ammunition, like what we needed to advocate for building this into the process from the beginning. So, you know, I can say anytime you get the opportunity to fill in a form, or to fill in a survey, it really helps. And it's not, like in my case, it's not going on deaf ears. Like I'm really using that to guide the type of programs I'm working on and help advise and decide where we go from here. Good. How are we for time? Are we coming up on our...
We have about, we're coming up. We have about 5 more minutes to the...
Good.
There's a question, are the format or questions similar in each of the war kits? Looking at the continuity and change discussion.
So the questions are pretty general, and we really created, because the kits, the primary focus was to be object-based. And so our goal was to put the objects, high quality tools into the hands of teachers, because you know best how to use it with your class. So we wanted to make it as versatile as possible. So our activity suggestions are just that, they're suggestions. So we know that most teachers are adapting them, they're creating their own, or they're using the basic ones kind of as they're written. But there are some continuity and change activities with the First World War kit. I don't know specifically with the second, but yeah, I will say that the activities are just a suggested starting point. So it's really meant for you to interpret them as you see will work best in your classroom.
Did you mention to them how like you're disinfecting the objects?
I didn't get into the details of that because that's all highlighted in the website. We've got a whole COVID protocols document, handling guidelines, cleaning protocols. So all of that's available. I will say that our main method is isolating, and that's we're going with the longest. Like, so I think 3 days is a minimum suggestion. We're going with 9 days because we want to go on the err on the side of caution. And we've got different scenarios because I know it's different in every province. So maybe in a place where it's really not risky, the students are able to share materials amongst themselves and it's kind of business as usual. And so you can have the kids handle the objects. Maybe that's fine. Or maybe you have a really small class and you can afford to give one student an object for the week or two. But if you're in a larger school, if you're intending for a lot of people to use it, it might work better to set up like a mini museum type idea and have students just use their eyes alone, just like you would in a museum, and kind of, but still seeing some physical materials has value. So that's the thinking behind that. I'll throw up the last slide that just has my contact information. So as I said from the beginning, please feel free to email me anytime. If you're interested in the pilot sessions or learning more, if you have suggestions, questions, you can also join us for office hours on August 25th. That's in English. It'll be in French on the 27th, also at 1 p.m. Once we move into the fall, we'll choose a time that's not in the middle of the school day, but we're just settling into a regular schedule for that. And also trying to think of how we can make it work across Canada is a bit of a head scratcher too. And also there's a feedback form, as I mentioned a couple of times. So I know Erin's going to put that into the chat. Oh, there's a link there if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts. I'm open to any comments, questions.
Again for the third time. Don't see it.
That's awesome. Good.
Okay.
So that's all.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra. It's such great information for, I know myself as a history teacher, I love this, and we'll definitely, I've booked the World War I kit.
Awesome.
Amazing. And it's so great that now we have World War II as an option, especially if you can't get the World War I. Yeah, and just so many great resources. And yes, you will have access to the PowerPoint, and the session is being recorded, so it will be up on the OHASTA YouTube page, and there's a link through the website. And if you enjoyed the webinar, we have another one coming up on the 25th. Specifically, probably a lot of you are Canadian history teachers. So on the 25th, there's another webinar with an amazing teacher who's going to talk about teaching, Sarah Murdoch, teaching Canadian history during this pandemic, and she has a lot of great ideas. So that's coming up as well. And please fill out the survey, and Sandra has graciously given you her email so you can contact her directly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone.